to those pictures that we are getting from Paris. This is because President Macron is about to arrive to take part in commemorations in the French capital, and we can just see him just arrive with his wife Brigitte. They are going to mark 10 years since the Islamist gun attack at the offices of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. 12 people were killed, including several of its best-known cartoonists. Let's talk to Nabila Ramdani, who is a journalist and author of Fixing France, How to Repair a Broken Republic. Nabila, thank you very much for joining us on BBC News. I know that you were based just a few streets away when this attack happened 10 years ago. Just remind us of what happened exactly 10 years ago.
Well, that's right, Nikki. I was literally a few streets away when the Charlie Hebdo attack started in Paris on January the 7th, 2015 at 11:30. So I, of course, remember it all like yesterday. There was a massive shock about what happened, even though there had been very sinister warnings beforehand, including a firebomb attack on Charlie Hebdo's offices and indeed death threats. And effectively, the gunmen, who identified themselves as members of Al-Qaeda, said that they were taking revenge against Charlie Hebdo for blaspheming against the Prophet Muhammad, who is, of course, the most revered prophet in the Muslim world. And Muslims were among the first victims, just as they were in subsequent terrorist attacks in Paris. And there is absolutely no doubt that everybody of right mind came together to condemn the absolute barbarity of what happened, no matter what the backgrounds. And two things can be true at the same time. And in line with all civilized notions of free speech, it has always been perfectly acceptable to condemn terrorist atrocities while also describing a lot of Charlie Hebdo's output as not just unfunny, but also criminal. There were, many people who were incensed at the way the much-loved figures, such as the Prophet, were depicted in a series of cartoons as figures of ridicule, and indeed far worse. The Prophet Muhammad was linked to all kinds of acts of evil in a manner that can only be described as violent and indeed pornographic, and, dare I say, in breach of hate laws that were never upheld. And there is no doubt that very ordinary Muslims, including poor immigrants from war-torn countries, were being demonized as well, and in a way that subjected them to attacks.
We can see the live pictures of President Macron greeting people at the scene. I remember from the days after, this shocked the whole world, and there became that Suis Charlie, I am Charlie movement, wasn't there, a few days after this attack?
Well, absolutely. Following the attacks, again, in which people from all kinds of backgrounds and indeed faiths were killed, world leaders joined vast crowds on the streets 4 days later in what became known as the Great Je Suis Charlie, I am Charlie march. And everybody joined hands to celebrate the French Republic's core ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. But most of all, the message offered at the time to those watching from every part of the globe was that free speech mattered and that it would be protected eternally. And 10 years later, the Je Suis Charlie legacy, the Charlie Hebdo legacy, certainly lives on. The magazine is still published and it receives government security grants. But the collective response we all witnessed in 2015 has by no means stood firm. And on the contrary, many argue that the attacks highlighted deep tension in French society that have still not been unresolved, and dare I say, cracks in an allegedly nationwide Je Suis Charlie solidarity appeared straight away when even school children were punished for not observing a minute's silence for the victims, for example. This was seen as extremely hypocritical because those who wanted to question the free speech myth were not just denied an opinion, but they were also demonized.
Okay, Nabila, I just want to pause you there because we just want to listen in to what is happening at this commemoration.
Monsieur Louis Logier, préfet, directeur général de la police nationale. Les porteurs de germes, s'il vous plaît. Les représentants de la famille de Monsieur Frank Brassolaro.
So there we had a solemn moment of silence as the first of those wreaths were laid at the front of the Charlie Hebdo building. You saw President Macron just standing there with his wife Brigitte in silence with the rest of the people as this memorial is taking place. Nabila Ramdani is still with us. What do you think? Because at the time we didn't know that this attack was going to be one of others that followed. What's been the long-term impact on the people of France?
Well, I think it's very important. The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, is leading commemorations today outside the old Charlie Hebdo offices. And he has specifically called for the events to focus, the events of today, the commemoration, to focus on appalling crimes, on barbaric acts of terrorism, rather than the ins and outs of satire and indeed free speech. And this is to avoid stoking up hatred and indeed division. And it's also highly significant that the families of the deceased, have also asked for today's ceremonies to be non-political and indeed dignified, because there is no doubt that the Je Suis Charlie slogan was manipulated for political reasons, and this is something that we need to pull away from. I principally see the Charlie Hebdo attacks as being about barbaric terrorism and not a chance to debate free speech. And I think more and more people have come to the same conclusion. There is still a perception that it's fine to demonize Islam, but not other faiths. And this is pretty unfortunate in a country which has the largest Muslim population in Western Europe, about 6 million people. And in the wake of the Charlie Hebdo attacks, and indeed there were subsequent terrorist attacks across France, not just in Paris, but also in Nice, for example, there was in which a lot of people from diverse backgrounds were killed. There was a steep rise in attacks against Muslims, while far-right parties such as the Front National, now known as the National Rally, enjoyed increasing electoral successes. And less than 2 weeks after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, the then Prime Minister Manuel Valls said that there was, and I quote his words, a social, territorial and ethnic apartheid in the suburbs that France was ignoring at its peril. So it led to far more divisions, dare I say, than unity, I'm afraid.
And as we mentioned, the magazine itself still publishing and has published a special edition to mark this 10th anniversary.
Yes, indeed. There's a new edition of Charlie Hebdo unveiled that goes on sale today. On the cover, there's typically a man sitting on a Kalashnikov, and the magazine called on readers to submit their, I quote, the funniest and meanest depictions of God in a typically provocative and defiant contest for the special anniversary edition. Dare I say, they are I think the fundamental issue here is that the magazine, some of its material, is in clear breach of hate laws that were never upheld, and that's also a problem, that the rule of law and including the implementation of legislation that exists against hate law and indeed hate speech should be applied to avoid this kind of extreme reaction, because otherwise you just have extremes talking to each other while the vast majority of law-abiding people get caught up in these barbaric attacks.
Nabila Ramdani, journalist and author of Fixing France, How to Repair a Broken Republic. Thank you very much for joining us on BBC News. We are watching these live pictures from Paris. As we said, the French President Emmanuel Macron taking part in these commemorations to mark 10 years since that attack by Islamist gunmen at the offices of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. 12 people were killed, including several of its best-known cartoonists. They were shot by two brothers angered by the magazine's publication of caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad. As we said, the attack sparked an international outcry, and we've seen that the wreaths are being laid there outside the magazine's former headquarters. There will be further ceremonies at other sites linked to the killings later today, and we'll have coverage of them here on BBC News.